Listen carefully. I caught my daughter, red-handed, trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could control my bank accounts. She was on a video call with her husband in my own kitchen, and I recorded every single word from behind the pantry door. What she said next made me realize that the girl I raised had turned into someone I no longer recognized. But let me tell you how a 68-year-old widow who spent 40 years building a successful catering business ended up hiding in her own home, documenting her own daughter's betrayal. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., even though I didn't need to anymore. Old habits from decades of running my business die hard. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but they could still knead dough, still chop vegetables, still create the recipes that had fed half the weddings and events in this town for 4 decades. My daughter Rebecca had arrived the night before. She said she wanted to spend some quality time with me, that she missed me, that her marketing job in the city had been so demanding she hadn't had time to visit. She brought flowers, expensive ones, orchids that must have cost at least $60. She hugged me at the door and told me I looked wonderful, that the house looked perfect, that she had been thinking about me constantly. I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. I made her favorite dinner that night, chicken piccata with garlic mashed potatoes and roasted asparagus. I spent $70 on ingredients because I wanted everything to be perfect. I used my good china, the set I had inherited from my mother. I lit candles. I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion. Rebecca smiled and ate and talked about her life. She told me about her new condo, about how well her husband Marcus was doing at his tech job, about the vacation they were planning to Bali. She asked about my health, about my routines, about how I was managing the house alone since her father died 3 years ago. I told her everything. I told her about my morning walks, about the garden club I had joined, about how I was finally learning to play piano, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for when I was running my business. I told her about my savings, about how careful I had been with money all these years, about the investments I had made that were doing well. She listened with such interest, asking questions, taking mental notes. I thought my daughter finally cared about my life. I thought she finally saw me as more than just her mother, but as a person with my own dreams and routines. How naive I was. How desperately foolish. The next morning, Rebecca slept in. I was already up, of course, making cinnamon rolls from scratch. The smell filled the whole house. I had always been an early riser, always been the type who couldn't sit still, always been the woman who showed love through food. When Rebecca finally emerged around 9 a.m., she was already dressed in yoga pants and a designer hoodie that probably cost more than my entire week's grocery budget. She had her phone in her hand, as always. That device seemed to be an extension of her arm these days. She kissed me on the cheek, poured herself coffee in one of my good mugs, and wandered toward the kitchen table. I was at the counter, preparing the icing for the cinnamon rolls. I was humming. I was happy. I thought my daughter was home, that she wanted to be with me, that maybe we could rebuild the closeness we had lost over the years. Then her phone rang. Marcus. I saw his name flash on the screen before she answered. My son-in-law, the man who had married my daughter 5 years ago and who always seemed to be calculating something behind his polite smiles. Rebecca answered and walked toward the back hallway, the one that led to the laundry room. She spoke in a normal voice because she thought I was too absorbed in my baking to pay attention, because to her I was just background noise, just the mother who cooked and cleaned and existed only to serve. Okay, babe, listen. I think we can make this work. Mom's condition is worse than I thought. The icing spoon froze in my hand. My entire body went rigid. Condition? What condition? I've been watching her carefully. She repeats herself a lot. She forgets things. Yesterday she asked me the same question 3 times, and she's making these financial decisions that don't make sense. Investments she can't possibly understand at her age. My heart started pounding. She was lying. She was inventing symptoms. I didn't repeat myself. I didn't forget things. My mind was as sharp as it had ever been. And my investments? I had worked with the same financial advisor for 20 years. Every decision was carefully considered and documented. But Rebecca kept talking, and every word was a knife in my back. Marcus, I already contacted that lawyer you found. He says we have a strong case for conservatorship. With medical documentation showing cognitive decline, we can petition the court to have me named as her legal guardian. That means I control everything. Her bank accounts, her investments, her property. All of it. I couldn't breathe. My daughter was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. She was planning to take control of everything I had worked for, everything I had built, everything that was mine. How much do you think she has? Marcus's voice came through the phone, tinny but audible. He had her on speakerphone. At least $700,000 in liquid assets, maybe more, plus this house, which is worth at least $400,000, and her monthly pension from selling the business. She gets $5,000 a month for the next 10 years as part of that sale agreement. I felt dizzy. She had been adding up my worth like I was already dead, like I was just a collection of assets to be divided and spent. Jesus, Rebecca, that's over $1 million. I know. And she's just sitting on it. She lives like a church mouse, barely spending anything. Meanwhile, we're drowning in debt from the condo. We need this, Marcus. We need it now. The desperation in her voice was real. But it wasn't desperation to help me, to care for me, to protect me. It was desperation to take from me. What about the doctor's evaluation? Marcus asked. That's the key part, right? You need a doctor to say she's incompetent. Already handled. I found a doctor who specializes in elder care assessments. For $3,000, he'll write whatever report we need. He'll document memory issues, confusion, inability to manage finances. It's all standard language for these cases. She had found a corrupt doctor. She was going to pay him to lie about my mental state. She was going to manufacture evidence of a disease I didn't have. And she won't fight it? Rebecca laughed. Actually laughed. The sound made my stomach turn. Mom? Fight? Please. She spent her whole life avoiding conflict. She's one of those women who apologizes for everything, who makes herself small, who never rocks the boat. She'll probably thank me for taking care of her. She'll think I'm doing her a favor. What about when the money starts moving? Won't she notice? By the time she notices, it'll be too late. Once I have conservatorship, she can't do anything. She can complain all she wants, but legally she'll have no standing. I'll be making all the decisions. And if she gets too difficult, we can always move her into a care facility. There's one about 40 miles outside the city. It's cheap, basic, but it keeps them safe and supervised. Safe and supervised. Code words for isolated and controlled. Code words for a nursing home where she could hide me away, where my questions would be dismissed as confusion, where I would slowly disappear from my own life. How long will the whole process take? The lawyer says 6 to 8 weeks once we file. We need the medical evaluation first, then we submit the petition to the court. There's a hearing, but it's mostly a formality. Judges almost always side with family members in these cases, especially adult children who seem concerned and caring. You're brilliant, babe. This solves everything. We pay off the condo, we finally take that trip to Europe we've been planning, and we still have plenty left over for investments. I know. And the best part? Mom will never know the difference. She'll be in her little supervised apartment, watching TV and eating institutional food, thinking her loving daughter is taking care of everything. She'll probably die thinking I was the best daughter in the world. Something inside me shattered in that moment. Not my heart. Hearts can break and heal. This was something deeper. It was the foundation of everything I believed about my daughter, about motherhood, about the bond between parent and child. I had given Rebecca everything. I had worked 16-hour days at my catering business so she could go to private school. I had missed sleep and meals and my own health so she could have music lessons and summer camps and a college education at a good university. I had sacrificed my marriage in many ways, my husband always coming second to building the business that would secure our daughter's future. And this was how she saw me, as an obstacle, as a resource to be mined, as someone too weak and stupid to defend herself. But she was wrong about that last part. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing slowed. A cold clarity settled over me, something I had never felt before. It was the clarity of absolute purpose, the clarity of knowing exactly what needed to be done. I quietly opened the drawer next to me. Inside was my phone, the smartphone Rebecca had convinced me to buy last year, saying I needed to be more connected, more modern. She had even showed me how to use it, including the voice recorder app. I opened that app now. My fingers moved with precision. I pressed the red record button. The counter started running. Then I picked up my phone and walked silently toward the hallway. My slippers made no sound on the hardwood floor I had refinished myself 5 years ago. The floor I had chosen, paid for, and maintained. The floor of my house, my home, my life. Rebecca was standing with her back to the hallway entrance, looking out the small window above the washing machine. She was completely relaxed, completely confident, completely unaware that her mother was less than 10 feet away, recording every word of her betrayal. "We should celebrate," Marcus was saying. "Once this goes through, we should take a weekend trip. Maybe that bed and breakfast in wine country you've been wanting to try." "Definitely. We've earned it. Managing Mom's care is going to be so stressful." The fake concern in her voice was Oscar-worthy. But it's what good daughters do. Someone has to protect her from herself. I stepped closer. Close enough now to see her phone screen. Close enough to hear Marcus's breathing through the speaker. Close enough to document everything with perfect clarity. "What about her friends? Won't they ask questions?" "What friends?" "Mom has acquaintances from her garden club, but no one close. She's been a workaholic her whole life. She never made time for deep friendships. There's no one who will seriously question my decisions. And if anyone does, I'll just say I'm worried about her living alone, that I've noticed concerning changes, that I'm acting out of love." People eat that stuff up. She had even planned for contingencies. She had analyzed my life, found my vulnerabilities, and planned to exploit them. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was calculated. This was premeditated. This was my daughter deliberately destroying me for money. "You're amazing, Rebecca. I'm so lucky to have you." "We're lucky to have Mom's money," she corrected with a laugh. "Same thing, right?" They both laughed. My daughter and her husband laughed about stealing my life, about locking me away, about spending the money I had earned through 40 years of blood, sweat, and tears. I took one more step. My shadow fell across her. Rebecca turned around. Our eyes met, and I watched the exact moment she understood. I watched her face go from relaxed to confused to horrified. I watched her eyes drop to my phone, held high, screen clearly visible with the recording counter running. 4 minutes and 32 seconds. 4 minutes and 32 seconds of documented conspiracy. 4 minutes and 32 seconds of proof. 4 minutes and 32 seconds of her own words condemning her. "Mom," she whispered. The phone fell from her hand onto the washing machine with a clatter. On the other end, Marcus was still talking, oblivious. "So we're agreed? We file next week?" I brought my phone closer to where Rebecca's phone lay on the washing machine. I wanted to make absolutely sure Marcus's voice was captured too. I wanted both of them on record. "Rebecca, hello. Why aren't you answering?" My daughter couldn't speak. She stood frozen, face pale, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I stopped the recording. I held my phone up higher, making sure she could see me save the file, making sure she understood that this was real, that this was documented, that this was over. Then I did something I never thought I would do. I picked up Rebecca's phone and I spoke directly to my son-in-law. "Hello, Marcus. This is Diane, Rebecca's mother, the woman you were planning to defraud and institutionalize. I just recorded your entire conversation, every word, every plan, every lie. There was a strangled sound on the other end, then silence, then the unmistakable click of a call being ended. I looked at Rebecca, really looked at her. This woman I had carried for 9 months. This baby I had nursed and rocked and loved with every fiber of my being. This child I had sacrificed everything for. She wasn't that child anymore. Maybe she never had been. Maybe I had been in love with an idea of who she was, not the reality of who she chose to be. "You have 2 hours to get out of my house," I said. My voice was calm, steady, cold. 2 hours to pack your things and leave. And if you ever try to come near me again, if you ever try to file any paperwork, if you ever try to follow through with any part of your plan, this recording goes to the police, to the State Bar Association, to that corrupt doctor's medical board, and to every single person you know. Mom, wait, you don't understand. I held up my hand. The gesture silenced her immediately. It was strange. All my life I had been the one silenced. All my life I had been the one who listened and nodded and accepted. And now, with one simple movement, I could make my daughter stop talking. I don't want to hear it. I don't want your excuses. I don't want your lies. I just want you out of my house, out of my life. But I'm your daughter. No. A daughter doesn't do what you tried to do. A daughter doesn't steal her mother's autonomy. A daughter doesn't plan to lock her mother away like a prisoner. I don't know what you are, Rebecca, but you're not my daughter anymore. I turned around and walked back to the kitchen. Behind me I heard the sound of Rebecca starting to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration and the realization that she had lost. I went back to my cinnamon rolls. The icing had started to harden in the bowl, so I added a little more milk and stirred. I focused on the simple mechanical motion of stirring, on the smell of cinnamon and sugar, on the familiar comfort of my own kitchen. My kitchen, my house, my life, mine. I heard Rebecca moving through the house, heard her on the phone, whispering urgently to Marcus, heard drawers opening and closing, heard the sound of her suitcase being dragged across the floor, heard all the sounds of her leaving. And I kept stirring my icing, kept preparing my cinnamon rolls, kept existing in the space that was completely and utterly mine. But to understand how I arrived at that moment of absolute clarity, that moment of perfect conviction, I need to take you back further. I need to show you who I was before I became the woman holding that phone. I need you to understand the full weight of what my daughter tried to take from me. I was born in 1955 in a small town in Ohio. My father worked in a factory. My mother cleaned houses. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. We were that in-between place where you have enough to eat, but not enough to dream. I learned to cook from my mother and my grandmother. They taught me that food was love, that the way to show you cared was through perfectly seasoned dishes and desserts made from scratch. By the time I was 12, I could make a 3-course meal without supervision. By 15, I was selling pies to neighbors to earn money for college. I met Richard when I was 19. He was 23, working as an accountant at a local firm. He had kind eyes and patient hands, and a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. Small ring, big promises. We got married in a church ceremony with 75 guests. I wore a dress my mother sewed. Richard wore a suit he borrowed from his brother. We had a reception in the church basement with food I had made myself, staying up 3 nights in a row to prepare everything because we couldn't afford to hire a caterer. But it was beautiful. It was ours. It was the beginning of something I thought would last forever. Rebecca was born 2 years later. The pregnancy was difficult. I was sick for 6 months straight. I lost 30 pounds before I started gaining the baby weight. The birth itself was 22 hours of labor that ended in an emergency C-section. They put me under, and when I woke up, Richard was holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. "We have a daughter," he said, and he was crying. I had never seen him cry before. I took that baby in my arms and made a promise right there in that hospital room. I promised her the world. I promised her opportunities I never had. I promised her that she would never have to struggle the way I struggled, that she would have everything, that I would make sure of it. That promise would end up costing me everything. The early years were hard. Richard's salary barely covered our rent and basic expenses. I stayed home with Rebecca because we couldn't afford childcare. I nursed her, changed her, played with her, read to her. I made all her baby food from scratch because jarred food was expensive. I sewed her clothes. I found ways to make $1 stretch into $3. When Rebecca turned 3, I knew I needed to contribute financially. But I didn't want to work retail or clean houses like my mother. I wanted to do something I loved, something that could grow, something that could become more than just a paycheck. That's when I started my catering business. It began small. I made food for a neighbor's baby shower. She paid me $50. Another neighbor saw the spread and asked me to cater her daughter's birthday party. I charged $100. Word spread. Soon, I was doing 2 events a month, then 4, then 8. I worked from our tiny kitchen. Richard would come home from his accounting job to find every surface covered with food. Trays of lasagna on the counter, pans of brownies cooling on the stove, salads assembled in our largest bowls. Our house smelled perpetually of garlic and baked goods. Rebecca grew up in that environment. She did her homework at the dining table while I prepped vegetables. She fell asleep to the sounds of me washing dishes at midnight. She learned to share her mother with a business that demanded every spare moment I had. When she was 7, I rented a commercial kitchen space. It cost me $800 a month, money we didn't really have, but I needed room to grow. I needed equipment. I needed the capacity to take on bigger events. Richard supported me, but I could see the strain. He was tired of eating leftovers from catering events. He was tired of me being exhausted all the time. He was tired of coming second to my business. But he never asked me to stop. He knew this was important to me. He knew this was how I showed my love, not just to my clients, but to him and Rebecca. Every dollar I earned was $1 toward a better life, toward Rebecca's future, toward security. The business grew. By the time Rebecca was 10, I was catering 50 events a year. Weddings, corporate parties, anniversary celebrations. I had developed a reputation for beautiful presentation and delicious food. I had raised my prices. I was making real money for the first time in my life. But it came at a cost. I missed school plays because I was catering a wedding. I forgot parent-teacher conferences because I was managing 3 events in 1 week. I sent store-bought cookies to Rebecca's class parties because I didn't have time to bake, even though baking was literally my profession. Rebecca never complained. She was a good girl. She got good grades. She made friends. She seemed well-adjusted and happy. And I told myself that it was okay, that I was building something important, that someday she would understand that all this work was for her. When Rebecca was 12, she started asking for things I still couldn't quite afford. Designer jeans, a laptop for school, a trip with her friends to an amusement park that cost $300. I worked extra events to pay for these things. I said yes to every booking, no matter how tired I was, no matter how much I wanted a weekend off. Richard started to pull away during this time. He came home later from work. He spent weekends playing golf with friends. We barely talked anymore beyond logistics. Who was picking up Rebecca, what bills needed to be paid, what was in the fridge for dinner. I told myself it was just a phase. I told myself that once the business stabilized, once I could afford to work less, we would reconnect. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. High school was expensive. Rebecca wanted new clothes every season. She needed money for activities. She wanted a car when she turned 16. I bought her a used Honda for $5,000, money I had saved from 6 months of extra bookings. She barely thanked me. She complained that it wasn't new, that her friends had nicer cars, that the color was ugly. But I told myself she was just a teenager, that teenagers were ungrateful by nature, that she would appreciate it eventually. The business continued to thrive. By Rebecca's senior year, I was catering over 100 events annually. I had hired 2 part-time assistants. I had upgraded to a larger commercial kitchen. I was making $70,000 a year, more money than Richard made at his accounting firm. But my marriage was dying. Richard and I barely spoke. We slept in the same bed but lived separate lives. He had his routines. I had mine. Rebecca was the only thing we shared, and even that was fractured. He blamed me for being absent. I blamed him for not understanding how hard I was working. We were both right. We were both wrong. Rebecca got into a good state university. I was so proud. I had done it. I had given her the opportunity for education, for a better life, for everything I had promised her in that hospital room. College cost $30,000 a year. Even with some financial aid, we needed to pay $20,000 out of pocket. Richard's salary covered household expenses. My business income went entirely to Rebecca's education. For 4 years, I worked like a woman possessed. I catered events every single weekend. I took on weekday bookings. I worked holidays. I worked until my feet swelled and my back ached and my hands cramped from chopping vegetables. And Richard left. He didn't leave dramatically. There was no affair, no big fight, no moment of revelation. He just left. He said he was tired. He said he had been alone in our marriage for years. He said I had chosen the business over him and he couldn't do it anymore. I was too exhausted to fight for him, too worn down to argue, too buried in work to even process what was happening. We divorced quietly. He took half of our minimal savings and moved into an apartment. I kept the house and my business. Rebecca was in her junior year of college. She took the news with a shrug, said she had seen it coming, said it was probably for the best. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer to come home for a weekend to support me. She just kept living her college life while I worked to pay for it. I kept going because that's what I did. I kept going because the business was all I had left. I kept going because stopping would mean admitting that I had sacrificed my marriage and my health and my own happiness for nothing. Rebecca graduated with honors. I was there in the audience alone. Richard had moved to another state by then. He sent a card and a check. I cried during the ceremony, but they weren't happy tears. They were tears of exhaustion, of relief that the financial burden was ending, of grief for everything I had lost along the way. After graduation, Rebecca moved to the city for her marketing job. She visited maybe 4 times that first year, always briefly, always rushing back to her busy life. She called once a month, and our conversations lasted maybe 10 minutes. I kept working. The business was doing well. I was making $80,000 a year. But I was tired. My body was starting to give out. My knees hurt from standing all day. My hands had developed arthritis. My doctor told me I needed to slow down or I would have serious health problems. When I was 62, I got an offer to sell the business. A young couple wanted to buy it, keep the name, keep the recipes, keep the reputation I had built over 40 years. They offered me $500,000 plus a monthly payment of $5,000 for 10 years from the ongoing profits. It was more money than I had ever imagined having. It was security, it was retirement, it was the ability to finally rest. I sold. I took the money. I invested most of it carefully with a financial advisor Richard had recommended years ago. I kept some liquid for living expenses. I bought myself a decent car for the first time in my life. I renovated my kitchen, the one place in my house that had always been utilitarian, never beautiful, and I started to live. I joined a garden club. I took piano lessons. I volunteered at the library. I read books for pleasure, not just cookbooks for work. I took walks in the morning. I cooked for myself, small meals, no pressure, just the joy of creating something delicious. Rebecca rarely visited during these years. She was busy with her career, with Marcus, with her own life. I understood. Or I tried to understand. I told myself that this was what success looked like, raising a daughter independent enough to build her own life. When she married Marcus 5 years ago, I paid for half the wedding, $20,000. She didn't ask me to. She didn't demand it. But I offered because that's what mothers did. Because even though I was no longer working myself to death, the instinct to give everything remained. The wedding was beautiful, elegant, expensive. Rebecca looked stunning. Marcus looked successful. They looked like people who had made it, who were living the kind of life I had always wanted them to have. I stood in that beautiful venue, wearing a mother-of-the-bride dress I had bought on sale for $150, and I felt proud. Proud that my daughter was marrying well, that she was starting her adult life with stability, that all my sacrifice had led to this moment. Richard came to the wedding. We barely spoke. He had remarried, a nice woman from his new town. He seemed happy. I was glad for him. I bore him no ill will. Our marriage had died a slow death, and we were both complicit in its demise. After the wedding, Rebecca and Marcus moved into a condo in the city. They seemed happy. They sent Christmas cards with photos of them traveling. Rebecca posted on social media about her successful marketing campaigns and Marcus's promotions. I lived my quiet life. I managed my investments carefully. My nest egg grew to about $700,000. My monthly pension check came reliably. I paid off my house. I had no debt, good health insurance, and enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I thought I had done everything right. I thought I had sacrificed well, had built something meaningful, had given my daughter every advantage. I thought the story had a happy ending. But I was wrong, because that Tuesday morning, hiding behind my pantry door with my phone recording my daughter's plot to steal everything from me, I realized something devastating. I had raised a woman who saw me only as a resource. I had created a monster by never teaching her the difference between love and transaction. I had shown her through my own life that mothers exist to be used up, to sacrifice everything, to give until there's nothing left. And she had learned the lesson perfectly. The 2 hours passed in a strange, suspended silence. I stayed in my kitchen, methodically cleaning up the breakfast mess. I washed the mixing bowls. I wiped down the counters. I wrapped the cinnamon rolls in plastic wrap and put them in the refrigerator, even though I knew I wouldn't eat them. Even though the sight of them would forever remind me of this morning, of this betrayal. Rebecca moved through the house like a ghost. I heard her in the guest room, opening drawers and closets. I heard her in the bathroom, gathering her toiletries. I heard her on the phone, her voice low and urgent, probably talking to Marcus, probably trying to figure out their next move. I didn't care. Let them plan. Let them strategize. They had nothing. I had the recording. I had the evidence. I had the power. When the 2 hours were nearly up, I heard Rebecca's footsteps approaching the kitchen. I didn't turn around. I kept my hands busy with a dish towel, drying a bowl that was already dry. "Mom, please." Her voice was small, broken. "Can we just talk about this?" I turned to face her. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her hair was a mess. She was clutching her suitcase handle so tightly her knuckles were white. "There's nothing to talk about, Rebecca. I made a mistake. I know I did. But you have to understand. We're in so much debt. The condo was more expensive than we thought. Marcus's company had layoffs. We're drowning. I was desperate." "So your solution was to have me declared insane and steal my money?" She flinched at the word steal. "It wasn't like that. I was going to take care of you. You would have had everything you needed. In a nursing home 40 miles away? Away from my home, my friends, my life? You call that taking care of me?" "I just thought—" "You thought I was weak. You thought I was stupid. You thought I would just accept whatever you decided because I've spent my whole life accepting, giving, sacrificing. And you were almost right. Almost. But not quite. Tears rolled down her face. Real ones this time, I thought, but I wasn't sure. I didn't trust anything about her anymore. "I'm your daughter," she whispered. "Are you?" Because a daughter doesn't do what you tried to do. A daughter doesn't look at her mother and see a bank account with legs. A daughter doesn't hire corrupt doctors and lie to judges and plan to institutionalize her own parent for money. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't care." The words came out flat, emotionless, and I meant them. I genuinely did not care about her apology. It was meaningless. It was noise. Rebecca stood there for another moment, waiting for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or absolution, or one last chance to manipulate me. But I gave her nothing, just cold silence. Finally, she picked up her suitcase. She walked toward the front door. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob, her back to me. "I love you, Mom." "No, you don't. You love my money. There's a difference." She opened the door and left. I heard her car start. I heard it pull out of the driveway. I heard the sound fade into the distance. And then I was alone in my house, truly, completely alone. I should have felt sad. I should have felt grief. But all I felt was relief. Clean, pure relief. Like a weight I had been carrying for decades had finally been lifted. I went to my computer. I backed up the recording to 3 different cloud services. I emailed a copy to myself. I saved it on 2 different USB drives. I labeled everything clearly with dates and times. Then I called my lawyer. James Burton had been handling my legal matters since I sold the business. He was a straightforward man in his late 50s, no nonsense, honest. I told him everything. I played him the recording over the phone. When it finished, there was a long silence. "Diane, this is serious. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted elderly abuse, possibly even attempted kidnapping, depending on how the DA wants to frame it. I don't want to press charges. I just want to make sure she can never do this. Then we need to take preventive measures. First, we're changing your will. Today. I'll draft something that explicitly disinherits Rebecca and Marcus. We'll specify exactly why, referencing this incident. That protects against any future claims that you were incompetent when you made the decision. Okay. Second, we're setting up a trust. Your assets go into it, with you as the primary beneficiary during your lifetime. After your death, the assets go to whatever charities or individuals you choose. Rebecca can't touch any of it, can't contest it, can't claim she was owed anything. Good. Third, I'm going to draft and file a letter with the court documenting this incident. It'll be sealed, but it'll be there. If she or Marcus ever tries to file for conservatorship or guardianship, this document will automatically be presented to the judge. It'll kill any petition immediately. How soon can we do all this? I can have the will drafted by tomorrow. The trust will take about a week. The court filing I can do by end of business today. Do it, all of it. Diane, I have to ask, are you sure you want to be this final? She's your only daughter. I thought about that question. Really thought about it. She stopped being my daughter the moment she decided I was worth more dead than alive. James was quiet for a moment. Then, fair enough, I'll get started immediately. After I hung up, I sat in my living room and looked around. This house, this.